The Retirement Cafe podcast, tackling the Marathon des Sables at 60 with Dennis Hall. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast with me, your host, Justin King. If you're thinking about your retirement or already retired, you're in the right place. My aim is to help you plan for and live a successful and meaningful retirement. Retirement is far more than just a financial event. It's a significant life event, a major transition, which will bring with it new challenges and opportunities. So each episode contains tips, information, and inspiration to help you feel more informed and confident about your retirement. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hello. And welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast. I am really excited this week to share my conversation with friend and fellow chartered financial planner, Dennis Hall. Dennis is well known in the world of financial planning as one of the good guys. When I set up MFP Wealth Management 12 years ago, Dennis was one of the experienced and well-respected financial planners that I looked up to and who helped me on my journey to creating the business that I have today. He has always offered sage advice drawn from his 35 years in the financial advice profession. But Dennis hasn't always been in financial services. He started his career in the Royal Marines before joining the financial services profession and ultimately setting up multi-award-winning Yellowtail Financial Planning in 2006. Maybe his spell in the Marines is what drives him to take on new challenges, most notably the infamous Marathon des Sables, a 250-kilometre epic run through the Sahara. Dennis is also a published author and often quoted in the consumer and professional press. In our conversation, Dennis shares his personal story and why he embarked on a hot, deadly run across the vast Sahara Desert for a second time at the age of 60 in October this year. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dennis as much as I enjoyed chatting with him. Welcome to the podcast, Dennis Hall.
And thank you for having me. I've been waiting a long time.
Dennis, it's fantastic to see you because I've been following your kind of endeavors closely and your, it's unbelievable endeavors that you've been doing. We are Strava friends. We do follow our endurance efforts.
We do.
But, yeah. You know, we've so Dennis, just for those who don't know you, I mean, you're a financial planner, and you were, hugely helpful to me when I was starting out in my kind of career. We go back to the old days of the Institute of Financial Planning. You got financial planning very early on, and I remember talking to the likes of you and a few other well experienced financial planners and saying, so how do we really do this well? And you gave me lots of tips and tricks and spent some very generous time helping me out before I started my own business. So Dennis, you're obviously a financial planner because I've just introduced you that, but you've got much more of a backstory. Tell me how did you get there? Tell me a little bit about your business now, and then we'll move into your recent pursuits a little bit later.
Well, yeah, I've been giving the financial advice in that sector for about 35 years, which is the career I took up after leaving the Royal Marines. And back then, it was very different to how it was now. It was all about going to see people and selling products, and not a kind of thing I was very comfortable with. So I wasn't particularly successful. It took me a long, long time to become even moderately successful. And that really only started when I decided to branch out on my own and just leave the comfort of an employer or an organization. Because for me, they didn't really get it. It was all about hitting sales targets every week and every month. And I really the most or the best relationships I was having with clients were when you weren't really talking about the things you were going to sell them. You were talking about their lives and the things they wanted to achieve. And in my own way, I stumbled across financial planning or life planning, and thought I was alone doing that kind of thing. And I struggled alone for quite some time until I discovered something called the Institute of Financial Planning, which was quite small, and found there were lots of people like me. And some of them had developed this skill to quite a sophisticated level. So in a way that you say you were feeding off other people, I was feeding off them to learn some of those skills that were less about the complexity of a financial product or investment strategy and more about the problems that we have as humans in making money work for us and fit in our lives, and all of those issues and problems that we have and fears. And I think that the last 20 years of my career have been more about understanding the human and less about understanding the financial product. They're not that complex, and I believe most of my clients, if they really wanted to, could sit down and do the technical aspects of our job themselves very, very well. But it's the problem that we all have around money, is that we're a little bit too close to our own, and we're a little bit afraid of making some of those decisions. And I'm going off track now, aren't I? I can see myself doing it. So I suppose, yeah, I'd say around 20 years ago, I was headhunted by a firm of accountants who wanted to get into fee-based financial planning in the way they thought I was doing it. And after about 3 years, I discovered they didn't really want to do fee-based financial planning because they were making a very good living charging commission on the back of selling products. But what they wanted was a backstop for the client that didn't buy the product. And they wanted to be able to charge them a fee. Right. Best of both worlds. Well, they're accountants. So I decided that I had to do this on my own, in my own way. But, you know, starting a business is quite an expensive proposition if you're not charging commission and you're going out from scratch with your, trying to build up your own client bank. So I sold our house.
Wow.
Sold our house to find the money to fund us, and said we needed enough money for about 5 years to establish a business that wasn't going to be overcharging clients on an annual fee basis. And whilst we had the financial stability from selling the house at the top of the market, I might add, we were unprepared for 2008 and all that happened in that financial crash. And it didn't take 5 years to reach profitability. It took more like 8. But we stuck with it, and we've been growing steadily ever since, doing our own thing. Eventually managed to get back onto the property ladder. But not in central London, which is where we were.
So Dennis, you presumably you joined the Marines, the Royal Marines, from a young age. Is that right?
Yep, 18.
18. And how long did you serve for?
10 years.
Wow. Okay. And then obviously then kind of this leap into a different world and a different career. What were the skills, I suppose, that you took from the Marines into financial planning?
I'm not sure I took skills. My reason for joining financial planning, I've been in the Royal Marines in a job that was a bit dead man's shoes. And I thought, if I don't make the break at 10 years, I'm going to end up 22 years. I'm going to come out with a sort of a moderate pension, but not knowing what to do. But throughout my latter years in the Marines, living in married quarters, there were knocks on the door frequently from people, trying to sell financial products. And I noticed that they were the guys driving the BMWs and the smart suits, seemed to having a lot of money. And I was the one living in a green world with a clapped out rusty Mazda, at the beck and call of Her Majesty, effectively, and after about 3 calls, I knew more about their products than they did. Technically, I'm pretty good. So I thought, this is a job I want to do. I can do this job, except I couldn't. I'm not a salesman. I don't like knocking on doors, and I don't like telling people to buy things that I don't believe in. But what I did have, and I think what you get if you join the Marines and you're in the Marines or the Marines, is that sense of service and not leaving behind, or not leaving a mess behind you. So if you're going into a situation, you will improve and then leave. You might not make it perfect, but you'll improve it. And I figured that's what I was doing with people that I would go in and meet, is I'd go in there, find a situation, deal with it, improve it, and move on. And it was a long, hard slog. It really was, for quite a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you sold the house and set up your own, obviously you came up with this quite a unique name, Yellowtail Financial Planning. What's the backstory to that?
You know, people who set up in our world, who want to set themselves up on this little pedestal, will find some Latin or Greek word for money or something, or, you know, some, or fiduciary, anything to try and make them look grand and important and learned. And or they would call themselves, you know, Dennis Hall and Associates or something. And I was so disillusioned at that stage with a large swathe of what essentially was an industry shifting products from financial manufacturers, that I wanted nothing to do with that world in that way. And I was in Japan with my wife. My wife's Japanese. I was in Japan with my wife New Year's Eve 2005, saying, I've got to get out of this. We've got to do our own thing. We've got to sell our house to do it. And we cannot call this business anything like that. And by the way, this sushi that I'm eating is probably my favorite. What is it? Hamachi, she said. Well, I can't call it Hamachi, can I? Hamachi Financial Services. Nobody knows what that means. It sounds like a Japanese insurance company. What's its English name? Yellowtail. Okay, that's as good a name as any. So there on the spot, Yellowtail Financial Planning it was.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I can just feel how the conversation, or sense how the conversation may have gone of Yellowtail Financial Planning. And by the way, dear, we're selling the house.
Yeah. I don't think she realized quite how long it would take to get our money back. Well, I didn't realize either, or quite how much we would put in. You know, I wanted a couple of years worth of income, really. We ended up putting in over $250,000 into the business and supporting people, because we'd hired staff at the beginning, and even though there was a downturn, it's not in my nature to fire people. I've taken a responsibility to hire people. They have mortgages to pay. I think that's part of that Royal Marines broad-shouldered approach, is that you will take the load if you can. So I did. I mean, you know, I'm not a businessman. I'll look at it like that. If I was a ruthless businessman, I would have cut some of those costs quite early.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Dennis, obviously we're on the Retirement Cafe podcast, and I think you're getting close to 60. Is that right?
I'm 62.
You're 62.
Something further away.
Good man. And you're obviously still running a successful financial planning business. You've just undertaken the Marathon des Sables. And we're going to come to that in a second, but and we'll discuss that more in the future. But I'm kind of feeling that retirement's not that close on the horizon to you at the moment. Not
really. I'm still learning in my job. I mean, I'd like to change aspects of what I do and maybe take a little bit more time out. But I think financial services around the world, but specifically in the UK, is in the midst of a great change, both in the way we interact with the consumers of financial services and the people that want advice, as well as the the automation that can be created through technology. And I still think that I can be useful here. I'm enjoying it. It gives me a sense of purpose, and I think that sense of purpose keeps me feeling younger than perhaps I am. And I have no intention of disappearing. If I can still be useful, I can still serve people, and I can still be learning, I will be doing this when I'm 80.
Brilliant. No, I mean, I come from sing from the same hymn book, to be honest. I think we're very fortunate that if our health is still with us, we can continue serving clients for a long period of time, well into our, I've mentioned before, but my old boss Martin is in his mid-80s, and he still goes in at 8 o'clock and finishes at midday nowadays to his business, and thoroughly enjoys it. And he's got a great team of people there who do probably the majority of the heavy lifting, but yeah, I think it still definitely keeps him young and connected, and he enjoys serving his clients. So we're very fortunate that we can do this throughout what is determined to be our retirement years.
Yes, I've seen too many people, particularly as a younger man, where people would retire without a sense of purpose or things to do, who would rapidly wither on the vine. I think perhaps less so these days, as there are more activities and there's more connectivity for people. But if you've spent a life working hard and probably not building up things to do outside of that life, and you're forced to retire, which a lot of people are, I find, through the people I talk to, that's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to go there.
No. And so you're keeping yourself freshly challenged with the business and some personal endeavors. And notably, obviously, literally hot off the press, you've just returned from the desert, from the Sahara Desert.
I have. It was not a great experience this time around.
Tell us the backstory to it, and then what it's about, and for people who may have no idea, and fill in the blanks for us.
So this was the 35th edition of something called the Marathon des Sables, organised by a Frenchman called Patrick Barr, who I believe got lost in the Sahara a while, but had an epiphany and wanted to bring that epiphany to the world. So created this desert marathon, but it isn't a marathon. It's a 7-day, 250-kilometer self-sufficient trek across a part of the Sahara between Morocco and Algeria. So I heard of this. In an odd way, the numbers aligned for me. I was 40, it was the year 2000, and it was the 15th edition of the Marathon des Sables, and I'd heard about it. I can't remember who from, but I'd heard about it and thought, I want to do this. And I'm a former Royal Marine. This ought to be well within my capabilities, despite being 40. And I went out to Morocco. I kind of trained for it. I trained for it by going off alcohol, if I remember, and drinking copious amounts of Red Bull, which we now know is not a great idea. But Red Bull back in 2000 was a health drink. I got out to Morocco. I had, from my memory, good times. So much so that for the following 10 years, I visited Morocco every year for a holiday. I like the people, I like the environment, I love the food. And I would take my partner with me for a little trek into the desert for a couple of days. They would be sat on a camel, but I'd be walking beside. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And I said to myself, I'm going to do this when I'm 60. It'll be the year 2020, and it'll be the 35th. In an odd way, those numbers beginning to align again, for me at least. And so I applied.
Just coming back, just for a second, excuse me interrupting. So 250 kilometers, I mean, in kind of old money, 155 miles, I think.
Something like that. Roughly just under a marathon a day.
So that's just the context here. A marathon a day over Mostly sand, I think.
Sand or dried up waddies,
Right.
stony underfoot.
And this is not just flat sand all the time. This is, this is undulating sand. I mean, I don't know what kind of heights you reach on a daily basis, but you can sure fill in that. And then presumably at a horrendous temperature. I mean, it's a desert for a reason.
It
And
is.
and not only that, you're carrying your own kit. I don't know how you can tell us how much. So 155 mile, carrying your own kit in horrendous temperature. This is no London marathon, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. But I'll have to tell you, the first year I did it, there was a famous London taxi driver who used to do marathons in a Roger Rabbit suit. And the year I did it in 2000, he turned up to the marathon in a Roger Rabbit suit. And hats off to the guy, he completed it, albeit he took the head off. But the guy was dead every night. The relentless heat. And I think that year the temperatures were averaging in their mid-30s.
Right.
This year, because it's normally done in April and you have cool nights and warm days.
Okay.
Because of COVID, it didn't happen in 2020 April, nor October 2020, nor April 2021, but it did happen this October. We flew out on the 1st. It has been the hottest October they've experienced for a long time. We were running in temperatures in the mid-50s. In fact, one runner recorded a temperature in the Erg Chebi sand dunes of 59 degrees.
Wow.
And you're carrying about 10 kilograms of your food for the period, sleeping bag, survival equipment, cooking equipment, safety equipment, and water. Water is pretty heavy stuff, and you're carrying between 1.5 and 3 liters of that stuff at a time. But there we were. We got there and we set off, and all a bit apprehensive on the first morning. But off we go on a shuffle, a little bit of running and jogging, and thinking this isn't so bad. We've got about 13 kilometers to the first checkpoint where we'll be able to refresh water. And I turned up at the first checkpoint feeling pretty good. I wasn't going to push myself. I was mid-pack. My intention was to try and run jog all the way around, which is what I'd done 21 years before, and like a lot of people. And then I think, who is it? Tyson says everyone has a plan until you're punched in the face. Well, the punch in the face that we received en masse were 50+ degree temperatures, which knocked a lot of people out, but also a diarrhea and vomiting bug, which went around the camp very quickly. And about 48% of the people had to drop out through dehydration over the course of essentially 3 days.
Right.
And quite how 50% of the runners didn't get it, I don't know. That's luck of the draw. But we had normally they would lose maybe 5-8% of runners who were maybe not prepared, a little bit of dehydration. They lost that in the first day and a half. By the end of day 3, as I say, 48% of people had to withdraw, as had about 30% of the medical and support staff. A disaster in that respect. And I don't know what you could have done. I mean, we were taking every precaution because of COVID, face masks, hand sanitization and everything. So, how this bug got through that screening, I don't know, but it took out a lot of people. But interestingly, as the bad news was going up, so was the sponsorship, as people were seeing just how difficult this was. I was raising money for the Royal Marines charity, and I think I picked up probably another £1,000 just by tweeting, "Oh my God, I'm dying," or words to that effect. I couldn't keep food down. Over 3 days of consuming about 5,000 calories in energy, plus the normal 2,000 sort of metabolic rate. So I'd probably needed, Well, I needed all the calories I had taken, but I couldn't consume them. I managed to consume and keep down about 2,000 calories across 3 days through all that activity. And my perspiration was smelling of ammonia. And I came back because I have never had that experience before and looked that up. And it seems that if your perspiration smells of ammonia, it's because there's too much of it in the body. It's not being able to get rid of it. But that's a byproduct of the body. Instead of burning carbohydrates for energy, it's burning protein. And where it gets that protein from is muscle mass. So I was eating myself. So 3.5 kilograms I thought I'd lost and was hoping was fat. Wasn't. There we are.
So 3 days, how far had you covered?
About 102 kilometers.
Wow.
In 50 plus degree temperatures.
Yeah.
And not knowing that for the first couple of days, not knowing that I'd got a diarrhea and vomiting bug. I thought that at checkpoint 1, I'd probably consumed a little too much water. And if you've done a lot of running and you consume a bit of water, you can get that sort of wishy-washy tummy feeling. But it wasn't that. It was I hadn't consumed too much water. My body was reacting to the first wave of that bug going through me.
Wow.
Partway through day 1, I sat down and thought, I'm going to end this now. I've done about 20 kilometers and I can't go on anymore. And then the Royal Marines part of me said, no, sit down. That doesn't make sense. If you've taken on too much water, just lay down for a little while, let the body get rid of it. And after about an hour and a half, I felt good, cracked on with the last sort of 10 kilometers that day and felt on top of the game. And that kind of pattern continued for 2 days.
Right. And what was the point that you kind of went, you know what, this is nuts. This is not the right thing to keep going with?
So I came in at the end of day 3, still feeling relatively strong in my mind. But I hadn't been able to eat all day. I hadn't been able to have breakfast, and I'd only had half a sort of a meal the night before. It took 2 hours to consume a meal. You know, these freeze-dried things that you rehydrate, and I'm chewing to try and liquefy the food and then swallow it with some water. It's the only way I could get it down. So it felt as though my throat had constricted to the point it was only letting water through. I couldn't have breakfast that morning. I couldn't eat any of the snacks. And I got to the end of that day 3 and said, well, I am starving. I need food. And I couldn't face it. I couldn't eat it. And I stayed awake all night waiting for a moment when I could just stand in the desert for another couple of hours trying to consume food. Because if I do that, my thighs, which were feeling really shredded at that point, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be ready to go again. But I didn't go to sleep. So I was awake in the morning and I thought, if I start today, sure, I'll get part way through, but I know I won't finish because I have only consumed 2,000 calories in 3 days, and I'm going to be a liability. We've already had one person die on the course on day 2. I've been running beside people who are hooked up to IV drips in the shade of sort of land cruisers, and I didn't want to be one of those. And so reluctantly, I just said to my tent mates, one of whom had already gone, had been withdrawn through heat exhaustion and dehydration. I said, I can't start today, guys. I don't want to be a liability. I've got to pull out. And I joined a queue of about 100 people that morning who had said roughly the same thing.
Yeah. Must have been a difficult decision, but it absolutely sounds like the right decision.
Yeah, it was the sensible decision.
Yeah. And, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I'm sure from your experience in the Marines that there's an element of sheer dogged determination that can see you through an awful lot of things. but also that kind of realization of actually what are the consequences of continuing to do this?
It's the consequences, actually, but both to yourself, but to others. You don't know who else you're going to put in danger. And about the same time that I dropped out, I bumped into and got chatting to an ex-lieutenant colonel who was also, he'd been 3 years out of the Marines, so probably still in his mid-40s, who had also pulled out with dehydration and vomiting and diarrhea. And we were just talking about what the military response might have been to lose 50% of your players in a theatre is wrong. And what would the military have done? Well, I think they would have done something different. Perhaps, started earlier in the morning anyway. The first day we had a local start time at 10 o'clock. The sun's pretty high. We could have got 3 hours of movement in covering the course if we'd kicked off at 7 o'clock. Self-sufficiency is one thing. Survival is another. I think you could have got more people through by starting at a more sensible time of the day, every day. You could have been less dogmatic about the water stops and perhaps thrown up some ad hoc stops where people could exchange. So they're carrying slightly less weight, but still getting the water and extra water. And maybe recognizing that something was up and perhaps I don't know what they could have done. I wasn't party to any of the conversations, but I think there are some things they could have done to perhaps lessen the impact. Not remove it. A D&V bug going around is going to take some people out, and therefore probably more than they would experience. But there were people suffering from heat exhaustion and dehydration, and they could have done something about that.
Sure. So, the question, which I'm sure is on lots of people's lips, is: Are you going to do it again?
Well, it's the second attempt. I got back, and I thought the management of this has been rubbish. It really annoyed me that we didn't start earlier in the morning. In fact, we reverted from Moroccan time to French time, which is already an hour behind, to satisfy the French. And I got back to a hotel room, eventually took off my sand gaiters and the stuff that I was wearing and threw it all in the bin and said, never again. Made my way across to Marrakesh, jumped on a plane, got back here and thought, there's unfinished business here. I'll be back.
Fantastic.
I'm not sure when.
Fantastic. And how's your I mean, literally we are only how many days ago were you in the desert?
What day is it today? I would have
13th, is it today?
Yeah, I stopped running on Tuesday evening last week.
Right.
I was still in the desert on Wednesday.
Yes.
Exactly 1 week ago.
So how are you now?
I'm okay, actually. I've had a couple of glasses of wine. I'm holding food down. My weight was 3.5 kilos less in 3 days. And about 1 kilo of that has gone back already. I was never dehydrated. I kept drinking and drinking. But, I've gone out for a couple of short 5-7K runs, nothing too quick, and felt a little bit shaky in the legs, but it's coming back.
Right. And obviously you've got a good strong base, I suppose, to build upon for your next time.
Well, I've learned something, that's for sure, and I've learned from people around me in the tent and what they were doing. And most people who set out to do this run said they were going to run, jog. Only the elites were going to run. And even then they would walk through the dunes.
Yeah.
Everybody walked.
Right.
Almost, apart from the elites, everybody walked. It slowed the average times down completely. And you know, when you're a runner, there's this kind of, "Oh, I'm going to walk, I'm not going to walk, I'm not going to walk." But sometimes you have to. And I'm not as young as I was. I don't have the speed that I had, nothing like. And I'm not entirely sure my body has got quite the stamina it had. It can keep going all day under the right conditions, but not at speed. And I think I've got to be a little bit kinder to my body.
Yeah.
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 And not kindness just in good food and wine. I've got to be a little bit kinder.
And I noticed that on Twitter that you said, that was, you were enjoying a fine glass of wine, and as you were in the desert, that you were thinking to yourself, I do want to make sure I get back to enjoy some of those fine glasses of wine that I've got at home.
Yeah, I mean, we save things, don't we? We buy things for a special occasion or what they may be, and sometimes maybe just find a moment where it can be just as enjoyable and special. Because that time might not come. And I think there was a 48-year-old guy called Pierre who just keeled over in the desert with a heart attack. And if he'd had a special bottle of wine back at his house, well, he never got to enjoy it. And I guess his family never will enjoy it.
Yeah.
We don't know when something's going to come along and take us away. So live for the moment, I guess. There's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. So, the Royal Marines charity, how much have you managed to raise?
So, just over £12,000.
Wow.
It took 2 years to do that because we are supposed to be running in 2020, and I'd raised about £5,000 by then. And then it all went very quiet for about a year and a bit. And then I started the fundraising again just 2 weeks before this one, and then hounded everybody through social media. I was on it all day, every day. Just give me money. Well, don't give me money, but give the Royal Marines charity money, because it doesn't matter which charity. They've had a rough couple of years because all the fundraising events, they've not been there until the London Marathon last Sunday. That one of their big fundraisers, it wasn't happening. So I'm just nagging and got about 6,000 in 2 weeks. And then the bad news from the desert came, and more people were chipping in, and some people were chipping in more. I'll double donate. Wow. And I was humbled and touched and moved to tears sometimes by the support that was coming from the people who follow me on Twitter and my colleagues in financial services who were just giving money. I don't care whether it's £10 or £1,000, and I've had that range of numbers. The fact that people they give according to their means, and I suppose their beliefs. Not everybody necessarily wants to support a military charity, but it's not a political thing. The guys that join the Marines do it through a sense of purpose and job and doing whatever they do, and they do great things for us, and they need a bit of help sometimes. And there's some really bad news. The ex Commandant General of the Royal Marines committed suicide last weekend.
One
of the you would say one of the toughest guys in the UK would have had it all together, but there are problems. Mental illness is as much a problem as a physical illness, more so perhaps because you don't see it. So I was blown away by people giving money, and there's nothing stopping them giving more.
No, and we will put the links in the notes for the podcast if anyone wants to add to Dennis's amazing total of £12,000 and to make that even larger for a very beneficial cause, then please do so.
And if not my charity, I think just give money to charity. They do so much good in this country. It's a kind of a voluntary tax that you pay, that you get to choose how it's spent. Yeah.
And of course, one of the things I often talk about is that, especially as financial advisors, financial planners, we're often very conscious about how people spend their money, whether it's gifts to charity or their regular shopping bills, etc. But I think we have to also be very conscious about how we spend our time. And we do talk about spending time as well as we talk about spending money. And as your, Saharan desert colleague there who will no longer be returning to his family and to his loved ones, he has no more time to spend. And we currently do have time to spend. And if you can spend time in the charitable sector, working, volunteering, doing things, that can be just as valuable if you can't write a check.
It can. And I think it can give you, the individual, a huge sense of purpose. And you will get feedback, positive feedback about the impact and the good you are doing in your world.
Yeah. And I noticed, I had a look at the Marathon des Sables website, and I noticed that it kind of wants to have a very low impact on the environment in Morocco. And again, talking about having a low impact, where we can have a big impact maybe moving into retirement, is that we can have a big impact with our skills, with our knowledge, etc., as into those sectors that could really do with whether it's taking on a challenge like you just done yourself and raising money for a charity, or whether it's spending your time within a charity helping them with all the skills that you've learned over your career. It can be hugely purposeful and give a lot to you.
And there are all kinds of other things. Older people, perhaps, who are working part-time or not working, have got more time available during their day. I help out with my local park run, which I think has been an immense movement. And we're trying to create more park runs in the area where I live, which is Exeter.
Fantastic.
That takes a little bit of time, but if you can bring a couple of hundred people through every Saturday morning of all ages who are joining a running community, so they're getting the mental benefits as well as the physical benefits of that. And even if they're not running, they're volunteering around the course. I find a lot of these organizing committees and the people who get a lot of this work done are older people, and they might not be physically able to go and run a marathon, but they can cheerlead from the side. They can be marshals. I'm talking about running again, aren't I? But there's so much you can do as a person. And if you're sat at home thinking I'm a little bit alone, there are plenty of places to go that welcome some help and give you a bit of companionship and friendship along the way.
Well, Dennis, it's been fascinating as always chatting to you this morning. Once again, thank you for the help that you've given me over the years, very personally. And
I think you've given it all back.
So that's very generous of you, but thank you once again. And for what you've just done and for this amazing amount of money. I mean, first of all, to take on the challenge twice, and it sounds like again in the future, which is just wonderful. Amazing opportunity to raise money and what you're doing. Where can people find out more about the great work that you do?
Which great work? I do great work in my work.
Your financial planning work, your charitable work, just more about where they could follow you, maybe on Twitter, or find your website, or drop you an email if they want to. So
my website is yellowtail.co.uk. There isn't a lot on it, I have to say. It's got an address and a photo. I'm on Twitter frequently, Yellowtail FP, capital F for Foxtrot, capital P for Papa, or financial planning. Where else am I? I used to go up to London frequently. I've not been doing that. I've got a Just Giving page, which will be open for a few more weeks, perhaps to take some money. I don't know. But I'm going to be tucking. That's my Lincolnshire roots coming out there. I'm going to be tucking myself away to get a couple of books finished that I've got on the go at the moment, which is trying to impart as much of my financial planning wisdom as I can around the people and the choices and the decisions we make. So yeah, look out for that, maybe.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, I'll follow with interest as always. I look forward to hopefully catching up with you live in person soon.
Well, that would be really nice, Justin. It's been too long.
Absolutely. So thanks for your time this morning, Dennis. Really do appreciate it. I know you're a busy man, and enjoy the rest of your recovery.
I will. I've got a wine tasting tomorrow.
Good man. Good man. Thank you, Dennis Hall.
Thank you.
A huge heartfelt thank you to Dennis Hall for taking time out to join me on the podcast today while still recovering from his epic desert adventure. To find out more about Dennis, his business and his adventures, or to sponsor Dennis, check out the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk for some helpful links. I love chatting with inspirational people about their adventures, their projects and their lives. So if you know someone who would be a great guest, please let me know on Twitter at JustinKingCFP, or you can email me on hello@theretirementcafe.co.uk. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the podcast either on your website or your preferred podcast player so that you don't ever have to miss an episode. And for more video content about retirement planning, head to my YouTube channel, Justin King MFP. So until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.